This video contains spoilers for the finale of The Falcon and the Winter Soldier and potential spoilers for future episodes and Marvel movies if our theories become a little too accurate. Now, after 6 weeks of speculation, The Falcon and Winter Soldier finally comes to a close in a new finale titled One War, One People, with a brand new title, Captain America and the Winter Soldier, introducing us to our brand new Captain America, Mr. Sam Wilson, played by Anthony Mackie, who everyone loves. Now, our theories this time were much more accurate than WandaVision. However, there are still some that were hilariously inaccurate, as we'll do a countdown of which theories we got correct, which theories we unfortunately failed on, and who was the best theorizer in this series. So everyone, please strap in and welcome back to another episode of As always, Professor Carnes, if you would please get us started with some of the amazing quotes from this episode.
Sure. So a brief recap of episode 6 using only out of context quotations. So if you haven't seen the episode, go back and watch it, and then this will make sense. First, we have to start off with Sam, and I will give some context for that. I'm Captain America. Huge line in the show, really significant. Okay. From there, aren't you tired of fighting for the wrong side, Mr. Barnes? Don't do this. Don't go down this path. Without us super soldiers, how much power does the power broker really have? Ugh. Mercy bears richer fruit than strict justice. Every time I pick this thing up, I know there are millions of people out there who are going to hate me for it. Who's in the room with you when you're making those decisions? Nice job, Cap. Looks like Zemo got the last laugh. Things are about to get weird, so when they do, we're not going to need a Captain America. We're going to need a U.S. agent. I have to tell you something about your son, and now they'll never forget what you did for this country. And of course, the closing, not a quotation spoken aloud, Captain America and the Winter Soldier.
There's so many quotes from this episode. I mean, Sam's entire speech can really be like a quote in and of itself. And I really like the finale overall. I think it was really emotional and empowering at the same time. But first, let's talk a little bit about our theories. So Professor Carnes did a data analysis for our theories. So Professor Carnes, if you would please get us started on that.
Sure. So across the sort of, I think 5 times we filmed, we generated 47 unique predictions. So almost 10 predictions per sort of filming session. The first of all, winner for the largest number of predictions. Second place goes to Olivia, 12 predictions across 5 films. Or 5 episodes. First place goes to Harry with 18 predictions across 5 episodes. So, more than 3 per episode, or more than 3 predictions per episode. So great job, Harry. Congratulations on sort of really having, a lot of awesome predictions to share. And then I took each of our unique predictions that we made. So we locked in predictions at the end of each of our episodes of filming. We locked in and committed. And so I recorded each of those and then calculated whether they were correct or incorrect. In a very small number of cases, I gave half credit for something that was half right, and it was just too good to give it a 0 overall. And so then I calculated the percentage that each of us got right of our predictions. Now, if you made the same prediction twice, I counted it both times. So, Olivia, you doubled down on the Super Soldier. What did you call it? Super Bowl?
Yeah, Super Soldier Mega Bowl.
Mega Bowl. So you gave that prediction twice. You got it right. I counted that as 2 correct predictions. So if you really went for a prediction more than once, you got credit for it more than once. Second place for predictive success was Olivia with 58.3% of her predictions being correct. And first place, and this is, I don't mean to brag, first place was Nick with 59.1% correct, just barely beating out Olivia. But this was a really close sort of contest between all of us. So great job, everybody. The one thing, so Harry, you predicted that at least your last prediction, which I didn't count, because it was sort of made not about the show, but about us as a group, was that we would get about half or more than half of our predictions correct. We were just slightly under. We were at about 48% of our predictions were correct. So we need to, we've done, I think, much, much better than we did on WandaVision. And we almost hit that 50% mark. Pretty good for, for people just watching a show and trying to project what's going to happen in the next episode. But, we're going to have to wait for, I guess, Loki to try to break that 50% threshold.
I wanted to first ask Professor Carnes, what are some of your thoughts for getting first place in the accuracy scale? Because, throughout the season, we all thought that you got the most theories wrong. Unfortunately, we were wrong about that. So what are some of your thoughts and feelings about claiming victory this time?
Well, so, there were definitely some things I was really happy I was right about. So I predicted that we would see the wing shield return, and we got a really satisfying wing shield with full Captain America shield integration in episode 6. But then I also had some predictions that I made early on, and like after we would wrap filming, I would actually say, you know what, I don't like that prediction. So like I predicted John Walker would be redeemed in the end. I don't like that they redeemed him. I was actually sort of unsatisfied with his redemption arc. I predicted that Isaiah Bradley would get a museum exhibit sort of alongside Cap. But we talked last time, and I said, I'm not actually totally happy with that prediction. So because it didn't seem to quite fit Isaiah Bradley's character. It seemed like sort of an abrupt turn for Isaiah Bradley, and so there were I think my predictions were accurate, but they were often predictions that I almost didn't want to be right as the show unfolded or as I thought more about the show. So I don't know what to tell you. I'm happy, a lot of my predictions came true, but actually some of them I sort of wish, I wish John Walker hadn't gotten this redemption. I wish he hadn't gotten to, quote Abraham Lincoln and things like that in this episode. But I'll take the win this time, especially after my disastrous performance on WandaVision. I kind of needed this.
Congratulations again, Professor Carnes. And Olivia, as a very close second place, I also wanted to hear some of your thoughts because you really made a lot of really cool predictions this time and some of them pretty bold. And to see that your accuracy level was so high, I think that's really impressive. So what are some of your thoughts and feelings?
Honestly, it's great that I did so well this time, and I probably owe it to the fact that I'm obsessed with the whole Captain America franchise, so inherently my connection to it probably sort of spurred some of those theories early on. And actually going off of what Professor Carnes was saying, I think a lot of the things that occurred in the finale, while I love them from a prediction standpoint, I sort of was disappointed with how the arc of the characters played out, with John Walker specifically. Even though I do sort of hesitate to call what they gave him a redemption arc, considering the fact that I think they're sort of setting him up to be just used as another tool by, not Hydra as an entity, but by Madam Hydra perhaps. So we'll see, I suppose.
Yeah, I gotta say I didn't love the John Walker turn as well. I thought that although this theory turned out to be absolutely wrong based on the show's context about John Walker being the final villain of the episode and his descent to madness, I kind of felt like our theory was very natural progression of the character based on what he went through this season and how his character was portrayed. And I think suddenly making him realize that, oh, I'm not Captain America or something, and then suddenly turning him into a less bad guy than he did in the previous episodes, I thought was slightly off to me. I felt like they could have developed that so much more, or that redemption arc could have come in a later movie or show after, he was a villain for quite some time. I get it. I think Kevin Feige wanted to make his character simple because US Agent did have that redemption arc in the comics. He wanted to stay faithful to the comics. But this is one of those times where I felt like it would have made so much more sense if he was just the villain of this show rather than Carly. I know I was right in saying that Carly was the final boss of the season, but I was disappointed about that because when I said that, I was like, I didn't want it to be true, but it turned out to be true. And I was like, yeah, I'm a little disappointed with that. So that's my thoughts about that. And I kind of wanted to circle back to the theories a little bit. I guess this is one of the most fun parts about the wins and fails. So Professor Carnes, based on all of these theories, I don't know if you did a countdown of what were some of the theories that we were most accurate about. Like we were spot on about this prediction. What are some of the predictions that we are most off of? Like we were just hilariously and totally wrong about what we predicted.
So as you might expect, we were most just way off after like episode 1. So episode 1 is where we really were kind of all over the map. So I think episode 2, Harry, was when you predicted the final trio of villains would be like a combination of Zemo, the Power Broker, and U.S. Agent. And like that made a lot of sense given what we saw at the end of episode 2. But when we fast forward to episode 6, it's way off. You had another one in episode 1 along those lines, Harry. Baron Zemo will recruit a team of supervillains. We got Batroc the Leaper, the Flag Smashers. Zemo might be funding them, U.S. Agent, and all of this is intended to make people lose faith in heroes. An empire that topples from within is dead forever. That was like a really cool prediction, but compared to how everything unfolded, just kind of way off. Along the lines of, I think, the way a lot of the predictions all of us made during WandaVision just took the show in a direction that's almost like fan fiction. Like that would have been a really satisfying show, but we were just way off. I mean, still, the single most uncannily accurate prediction was probably Olivia's prediction. We're going to get to see Bucky's knife work in it. I mean, that's to Olivia's point, like, you're probably of the four of us the most committed fan of this franchise or this part of Marvel. And I mean, you just exactly called it. And within 2 episodes, we got exactly what you predicted. And so we have this range of like just dead on predictions, and then early on stuff that is pretty far out there. As it gets closer to the end, our predictions kind of there's less room for us to be imaginative. So by the end, we all have collectively like a higher success rate. And I think if you're trying to game this, like if you really want to win Loki, I think the thing to do is really hold back on predictions in the earlier episodes, and then load up on the obvious stuff later on. But I don't think any of us are going to do that, because what's the fun in that?
I, for one, really love crazy predictions, and to see myself being proven wrong, it's fun making these theories, thinking about what would happen, but then the theories are not accurate at all, so I don't get spoiled with the show. I think that's when the different theories are most fun, but I also love that we have actually accurate predictors who are able to predict accurate theories rather than me just going off like, this is what's going to happen, when it's totally the opposite of what happens in reality. Yeah, so I wanted to just talk about, kind of continue our conversation about the general thoughts of the season and the episode. What are some of the points? Because I think for our theories, I think a lot of it is what we wanted to see from the show. And I would say that for some of our theories, we were happy to be proven wrong. But for some of the theories, we were a little less happy to be proven right, like Professor Carnes said about the John Walker theory. So let's recap some of the things that we liked most about the season based on our theories. Like, which theories are we really happy about that we were right about? And what are some of the theories where like, yeah, I was right, but I can't be happy about it? So I guess to start off, I mean, I was on Team Sam being Captain America for the first episode. I'm really happy to see it happen. I think they did it really, really well. I was extremely happy to see myself being right on that, but then that was kind of obvious, so I wouldn't give too much credit for myself for that theory. I did think, I don't know if this is entirely accurate or not, but we did kind of predict that Zemo had one trick up his sleeve in the last episode. He did, and I thought that was really cool what he did. Zemo officially becomes the most successful MCU villain. He wins every single time he appears. Not even Thanos has that record, so kudos to Zemo. You're the best MCU villain now. And also with that Zemo dance, I really loved. 2 of the things I didn't like from the season. First of all, the John Walker story arc, which I kind of talked about. Second is just Carly being the final villain. I think that Carly's characterization was really good in the first half, but in the second half, she just kind of did a lot of really violent and evil stuff that I felt like was a little off. I felt like, she was supposed to be a sympathetic character, but they're making her like less and less sympathetic, which I thought was slightly off. And I thought her death scene felt a little weird to me. I don't know what part of it about it, but it feels a little rushed, like her character arc closed off too early, and it felt like something was missing from there. And I know there was this whole rumor about there's supposed to be another storyline about the pandemic, but because, of course, of the COVID-19 pandemic, Marvel didn't want to be insensitive, so they took it out. but I'm really curious to see if that's actually true. And if so, what was that storyline supposed to be? Because I think maybe the reason why Carly's character felt a little rushed and incomplete was because they had to take a storyline out. In that case, I don't really blame anyone for that problem. So that's a little bit of my general thoughts on the season.
So I similarly was not, fully satisfied with the way Carly's arc unfolded. And it actually reminded me with, and this is not a criticism of the film, but the sort of lingering dissatisfaction I had with the way Killmonger's sort of perspective was kind of removed from the MCU. So you have a character who is, in many respects, like kind of right. What's happening isn't just, what's happening is wrong. And rather than sort of engage seriously with their perspective, one storytelling device you can use is just make them a little too violent, make them willing to kill. And then that sort of, allows the story to kind of sidestep the argument they're making. And I felt like that was very much the sense I had with Carly's character, is like, she's making good points about structural problems in the world. And then they have her do some killing that in her case was not as organic to her character. With Killmonger, it was sort of a story that made sense as a whole. With Carly, it almost seemed tacked on, like they said, okay, this worked to sort of get audiences past Killmonger. Maybe we'll try it again with Carly. So this is a rare time when I was actually kind of unsatisfied with a big part of the ending of an MCU property. Now, maybe upon rewatching, when I watch it all together, I'll connect the dots more effectively. And so I'm open to the possibility that, I'm just, missing some information or not paying close enough attention. But I felt like Carly made some really good points, but they're kind of just easy, the easy way from a storytelling perspective to dismiss them is to just say, oh, well, she's violent, so we don't have to take her seriously. And I wasn't totally satisfied with just, she's gone from the show and we don't have to think about it again. I really liked Sam's speech. And I liked that the GRC, made the kinds of changes Carly was calling for. But I didn't like that way of getting rid of the character and her perspective. So yeah, this is a rare criticism of the MCU from Nick.
I think I definitely felt similarly that there was something kind of off about Carly's death scene. I do felt maybe it was just that it was rushed or something in the character arc felt incomplete. But I think that they did a decent job of sort of avoiding the criticism that they were completely sidestepping her perspective by like following her death up with Sam's speech. So it's kind of sort of from a writing perspective of a sort of martyrdom that Carly takes on, where like her ideas are then validated by everything Sam says to the GRC. So even though I don't necessarily like the how it happened, I'm not entirely dissatisfied with the way they did it.
Yeah, I agree. Because in the end, even though kind of like how we talked about in the beginning, we like sympathized with her a lot, but then towards the end, we kind of saw her like just turn more violent. Like through Sam's speech, like she still remained like kind of like what Olivia's saying, like this martyr, and like we still like sympathized with her because like we all like understood her points. And yeah, I guess that death scene really just had to do with also for me the reveal of like Power Broker being Sharon Carter. Again, that was one of the reveals, the theories you got right as well. But I definitely agree. I thought that scene in particular I had some problems with. I did think it was kind of rushed and a bit like cheesy how it went down, how she just like killed Carly and then Sam had like no problem in like letting Sharon just kill Carly like that. So yeah, that part I thought was like really rushed and I thought it was kind of weird. So yeah, kind of like the end result of us like sympathizing with Carly, showing how her points were valid, but I'm not really sure if I agree with how it was executed with like her rush death scene and like her kind of like messy arc at the end.
Because it's kind of obvious how much we like the show. Just because we're talking about criticism doesn't mean we don't like the show. I think liking the show meaning invested means seeing some of the problems that it has because nothing is perfect. I think two of the other complaints I had with the show, one of them was kind of a smaller complaint on my end. I think Batrocc's death was a little weird too. They didn't really show him dying on screen, which you're even really confused about whether he's dead or not. He's a pretty significant character now because he has made a really great impression on the audiences. But to just kill him off like that, I feel like is a little underwhelming. I feel like they should have kept him alive for another season or something. He can just remain a side villain in the Captain America area of the MCU. The other thing I didn't like was not enough Torres. I thought he was a great character from the season, and I thought that he should have just had so much more scenes. And I wish that he shows up more in Captain America 4, which we can obviously talk about later. They definitely set up for him to become the Falcon like he did in the comics, which is really cool.
Yeah, I certainly agree with those two things that Harry mentioned. And just touching on a point that Professor Carnes mentioned earlier, I think the biggest problem I had with the ending concerned what they did with Isaiah Bradley's character. Because I do think that from the way they presented it, they can get away with it from a storytelling perspective. I don't think there's any fault with it in the fact that it doesn't make sense narratively. And I definitely understand why they did it, in the fact that they thought leaving it as it would be too dark for the time we're in right now. And I respect that as an opinion, but I do just think it would have been more realistic and perhaps honest if they were to have left it the other way, or simply found another way to resolve it without it having to have been this sort of public acknowledgement as a sort of apology for what they did to him.
Yeah, I mean, that was the prediction where I locked that in last time, and then after we stopped filming, I actually disowned it. I was like, you know what? I don't like that prediction. It doesn't line up with the previous encounters with Isaiah Bradley, and it would be too abrupt, sort of fundamental change in perspective for this character who says, I don't want any contact with, I don't want to be publicized. There are people who will kill me. I want to be left alone. And so, I thought from a storytelling standpoint, they did the best they could to get us there. But Olivia, I agree. It still felt like, the wrong ending, in the sense that it didn't seem consistent with the start of the show. It didn't seem like that's where we started out. So, but Harry, to your larger point, can you be a fan of something and still have criticisms of it? Yeah. I mean, this won't be an A+ for me. This will be like a B, but that's still a good grade. This is still a show that does a lot of universe building and, actually does a deep dive into, one character, really two characters who, multiple characters who are important to the MCU who've never really gotten their due, on screen. And so I think, I'm going to offer these criticisms today, but I'm still happy the show exists. Like, not everything the MCU is going to do is going to be an A+. So I think we can pick it apart and talk about it and talk about, what we would do differently without saying, oh, let's just throw the whole thing out. It's no good.
Yeah, I kind of feel like I think one of the reasons why I think some parts of the show might have disappointed some people. I'm not saying I'm necessarily disappointed with the show. I think it's just different from my expectations, is because walking out from Captain America movies, especially the Russo brothers ones, they're very narratively focused on the plot itself. So in the Captain America movies, he's kind of reacting to situations that happens around him, taking a more passive role in these movies. And I think walking into the Falcon and Winter Soldier is a continuation of that series. I think we kind of expected the same like grand plot, like villain has this evil plot, which is why I came up with that Zemo theory, because it kind of is consistent with the Winter Soldier and Civil War. But then it turns out it's actually a very deep character study, where our protagonist this time, Sam Wilson, he's obviously super different from Steve Rogers. He's also taken a much more active role in this plot too. He's doing a lot of things by himself rather than just reacting to his situations. The plot itself, for some people, might feel a little thin because there's no elaborate villain plot. It's just really Carly and her group of people, trying to right a wrong, and the heroes must stop them. But I think what makes the show good is the whole journey that Sam takes to become Captain America. And I think that's the main point of this series. But I think one of the complaints I have with both WandaVision and The Falcon and Winter Soldier is, first of all, I understand that is a Disney Plus show. They can't make it too elaborate so that people don't have access to Disney Plus can't understand the movies. But I feel like sometimes it results in, for both shows afterwards, I feel like in terms of the story, there's a little bit of emptiness where I'm like, it feels like a simple story dragged out for a bit longer and made more complex than it needed to be. And it felt like there are a lot of plot threads in both series that were in the previous episodes, and they kind of tied them together in a, I wouldn't want to say rushed, but not as steady as I would have liked pace in the end of these series, making it feel like it could have been like 1 or 2 episodes more to really establish these characters a little more. So I think going to the future, if I was Marvel Studios, I would probably increase the runtime of an episode, because I think one of the problems WandaVision had was that each episode was just too short at the very beginning. And I think probably just, it doesn't need to have an elaborate plot, but I think just kind of not having too much like plot threads, just kind of telling a simple story, I think is the way to go for these series. So both series are extremely great. I enjoy both. Would definitely give them both at least a B+. So that's kind of my verdict.
Overall, I felt to Harry, I agree with you that like a lot of the characters' development, I just wanted to know more. So like, you know, Sharon Carter, what the heck happens between the last time we see her in MCU films and the present? I mean, we're missing so much character development, so much, you know, plot and story. Now maybe we'll get that, or maybe she's a part of the secret invasion and she's really a Skrull. But it feels like there's something big missing there. That's not to say though that the MCU couldn't go back and fill in some of it. But then other characters, it did seem like the sort of character development was just a little too brisk. I love the sort of new Zemo, but there are some, you know, they were kind of retconning some pieces of Zemo's sort of character and biography. It seemed like a big exercise in kind of repositioning the pieces on the chessboard to set up for something else new and great. I'm happy with that. But many times I'm like, well, I stepped away for a minute and I missed a bunch of moves. And maybe we're going to go back and see those at some point in the past, or at some point in the future, we're going to go see what happened there.
Yeah, for me, one of the problems, I don't know if we talked about this, but I do feel like Bucky was kind of underdeveloped, or we kind of focused a lot less on him towards the end. Like, I know we talked about how his powers were first kind of like underused, and I feel like we focused a lot on him like in the beginning. We saw him like through his PTSD, his really when he went on like on that date, his sessions with a therapist, and then towards like the last half of the season we start focusing more on Sam's arc, which again, how we talked about, is like the best part of the show. But I definitely feel like Bucky as a character could have been explored more, and he was just kind of like simplified toward the end. And I mean, you can kind of just tell by like, I don't know if you remember like the last title card, like it's Captain America and Winter Soldier. Like Sam goes through like a complete change, but then Winter Soldier kind of like remains the same for me. Yeah, we talked about how we maybe would have wanted like a Captain America and Bucky, or Captain America and White Wolf, or something like that. So yeah, I definitely think like Bucky's character like towards the half was kind of like forgotten about, which I would have liked for them to delve in a bit more. Maybe in Captain America 4, I don't know. But yeah, they definitely focused a lot more on Sam's character, which was done really well. But I would have liked a bit more with Bucky for sure.
Yeah, I suppose if we're giving out letter grades to the shows, I think I'd ultimately give both WandaVision and Falcon the Winter Soldier an A, just alone, no plus, no minus. But I think it's more because I tend to be a very character-oriented person in the first place. And I think for a long time, Marvel's done a really good job of tying their character stories together in conjunction with like the very complicated and serious plots that we've seen like unfold throughout the movies. But I do think a flaw that you see in the MCU as the movies get bigger and more complicated and you have these huge crossover events is that the sole character arc of one character tends to get lost in the mix of just the mass amount of people that they have to contend with. So I think it's a fresh and nice change to be able to see them focus back on those one characters, even if it's at the expense of plot. So I do think that creativity and the sort of freshness that we got with the shows really impressed me.
No, and I guess we talked about this with Falcon the Soldier, that this feels like the first like Marvel story that's like set in the real world, right? That this just like feels really, really grounded in reality. And again, I guess like how we were talking about this, like there's just so much commentary in this show. Like it's critique about like the US government, it's critique on like patriotism, it's racial commentary. Like it definitely sets out to do a lot, which I find really which I really, really admire. And it did execute a lot of things very well. So yeah, it just set out to do a lot, and it's very bold for Marvel. So it's just, it just makes me even more excited about Phase 4 and what they're gonna do.
Thank you everyone for tuning into another episode of Different Theories. Now Loki is coming out in June, so keep an eye out for our brand new series of Different Theories. So thank you so much, guys. Please subscribe and like this video and our channel, and we'll see you next time in another episode.